Welcome back to the Strength and Speed Podcast. I'm your host, Conquer the Gauntlet Pro and Strength and Speed owner, Evan Perperis, and joining me, I have Brenna Calvert. Brenna, say hi.
Hello, everybody.
So we just got back from Kuwait yesterday, or for me, it was like early this morning, and I still haven't slept yet. But we wanted to get this recorded and get this out to you as soon as possible to kind of share our experience. Before we get to that, though, a quick word from our sponsors. So this episode is brought to you by Squirrel's Nut Butter. So if you're having some chafage issues while running, whether it be training or racing, you can pick up some Squirrel's Nut Butter. They have it in like a deodorant stick, so you can kind of apply it without getting your hands messy, or they also have it in a tub. In addition, if you like icy hot type stuff, they have something called Born to Rub. So it's like a vegan, paste essentially you put on, and you kind of feel the heat on it when you apply it to your skin. So I got some of that. I got some of the Squirrel's Nut Butter. I used it this past weekend at the Hannibal Race in Kuwait, and I've been using it for a couple of my training runs where, I know I have a couple of pair of shorts that really tend to bother me. So tried it out on those, and it's been working great. Yeah. And Brenna hasn't tried it yet, but we got some for her. She's going to get the weekend of Endure the Gauntlet, which is, by the time this comes out, it'll be like a week away.
And that's what a perfect weekend for the anti-chafing nut butter, because I'll do some miles with you, so probably going to need it then.
Yeah. And I just said Endure the Gauntlet, but I meant OCR mill. As you can see, the sleep deprivation's going real well here. All right, so
who knows, by the end of this podcast, we might just not release it. It might be delirious.
So this episode, we're going to talk first about Hannibal Race Kuwait, kind of focusing on the race itself and the experience, since this is an OCR podcast. And then the second half of the episode, we're going to get a little bit more into our trip to kind of highlight some of the things that made this more unique. So if you're just here for OCR, definitely listen to the first half. If you want to know a little bit more about the whole racecation, which is, to me, was really what makes it special, then make sure you listen to the whole thing. All right, so let's get into the race, right? So we flew over to the race. It's an 8-kilometer race. Brenna, why don't you tell us a little bit about Hannibal Race, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so 8 kilometers wound up being, it's close to 5 miles. So it was, I think, roughly varied, like shy of 4.5, 4.3 with our watches, depending on who you were asking. Amazing. So this was the second Hannibal race that I have done personally. First was in Lebanon. This one, imagine the desert. So, I mean, it's sand. So, like beach sand. It's not packed or hard. It was all soft. And, I mean, to paint a picture, the very first thing, I don't know. I expected desert, and I was thinking flat because, I don't know, I've never been, and that's what I thought. Oh, no. The very first thing we have when you, go from the start line is a straight-up mountain hill, and it's all sand. So that was a great start to the race. I'd say it was maybe a less than a quarter mile up the hill, right, Evan?
Yeah, I'd say that's about right.
Yeah, and I mean, it didn't start out too steep, and then right at the top it got kind of steep. And running on sand, the whole race, that changed for me just the dynamic, because it wasn't technical terrain with gravel. It wasn't like tricky footing, but your feet were sliding. It worked the hip flexors, different parts of your body, just because I'm not used to my entire foot shifting and sliding the entire way. I wore Innovate rock lights, I believe, that were amazing. They worked grip wise. I mean, really, I wouldn't say it's slipping because of mud, but you slide. I can't reiterate the sand enough. Running downhill on sand is my new favorite thing. There's a really good, steep downhill portion that I love downhill anyways, but on the sand, you could just really fly, let your arms flail, and it was amazing. But basically, they have your variation of basic obstacles. So we start out at the top of the hill. Your very first thing, once you peak the hill, they have, I'd say just the curtain to the rest of the course. And they have these, big, heavy chains hanging down, and you just kind of run through the chains. and then take off. And that's where you literally just opened up and took off. And do some good running. They mixed in some walls. There was like a over wall, an under wall, through wall, monkey bars. What else was back in that back section? They made a tunnel, kind of, again, it was straight sand, so they built like a tunnel to crawl through that they filled with some very lovely bouquet smelling dirt. Definitely didn't smell good, let's say that. And
you say the tire?
Oh yeah, so I feel like Conquer the Gauntlet family would recognize it. I ran up to it and I was like, oh, that's familiar. It looked like rubber roadblocks, so basically tires strung together going vertically up a wall. So you climb up the tires, up and over, and it was pretty high. I mean, I'd say 12, 14 feet up in the air. 14, 16 feet up in the air. It was tall. And the terrain, I mean, again, it was way more hilly through the whole thing. I thought after the first climb it was going to level out, but it just kept changing. And there was like these big old ravines and like canyons almost to look at as we were running along and winding through the course. And then as we start making, I would say, the back half of the course and like the descent, making our way down, which I just kept thinking, okay, we're going to head down soon. We're going to head towards the festival area where there's like their gauntlet of obstacles. They had a barbed wire crawl, very low barbed wire. I mean, I tried to initially make a roll and start rolling. Nope, couldn't do that. You had to low crawl. That was the downhill run portion. And then it was really cool. They had quintuple steps thrown in the race, and this was not there in Lebanon when I did it at Hannibal Race, so this was new to see. And they were actual like separate quintuple steps, so big squares like the American Ninja Warrior style setup. And I was actually really nervous because at Hannibal Race you attempt the obstacle once and then there is a burpee penalty. So I really was not wanting to do burpees, and the quintuple steps with like sand on your shoes, I was kind of expecting to like face plant, to be honest. I don't know about you, but I was worried that I was just going to slip right off because it was just a painted wooden structure, but didn't. So that was awesome. Loved seeing those there. They added a balance element, so it was just a really nice kind of 4 feet off the ground balance beam. But again, that was not in Lebanon, I don't believe, if I'm mistaken. I don't know.
Yeah, that was new.
Yeah, so that was exciting because I love balance. And then they had a nice little like tunnel crawl, mud mounds, and that's when you headed into the final gauntlet of obstacles. So this is like, I always say it wrong, the Battle of Cannae?
The Cannae?
Cannae, yeah. So that's what they call their like festival area gauntlet of obstacles that we would be familiar with. You finalize the course, and I mean in the last like maybe like less than a quarter mile, I don't know, you come to a big A-frame cargo net, really tall, big structure to see, so it catches the eye. And it's funny because we're used to, I'd say most cargo nets in the US or standard races that we go to, even in Europe, you kind of have a standard size of square on your net. Well, I want to say they made their net personally, I think, so the squares are really big. And there's even a picture, I think I like slipped and missed the first square and had to make some like adjustments. So for short people, that's probably different and would throw you off. And Evan, do you want to explain what we did over the cargo net?
Yeah, so we get to the cargo net, and just like pretty much all OCR athletes in America, right, we get to the top and we do the normal flip. You lean over and you flip. And as soon as we flip, the volunteers start yelling at us. And they're yelling in Arabic, so I can't understand what they're saying, but they're clearly not happy. And
we're separate. Like, Evan was first, and then I'm a few minutes behind. We both did it.
And they're like yelling, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't know what you want me to do. Like, I'm gonna keep running, and it's like I did the obstacle already, so it's not like I'm gonna go back and like redo it without flipping. But yeah. And what was funny?
Well, in Lebanon, they like were cheering, right?
Yeah, in Lebanon when we did it, people went nuts. People thought it was great, but I guess in Kuwait they were not happy with us. But
side note, before I finished the obstacles, we did talk to Amin, the owner of the race, afterwards, and he was like, "Yeah, I told the volunteers and the staff that Brenna and Evan would be flipping, and like to expect it, but of course, I don't think that translated days later to remembering. So it was kind of comical because Evan and I both got in trouble. And of course, Evan's wife was sitting there and, like taking pictures and kind of got to witness it and giggle at us. But anyway, so we did the cargo net, but also I think both did the same thing. They had an 8-foot wall right there, and we both kind of flipped over that. And I remember, like, as I was running up to it, the volunteers were like, okay, you can do this, you got this. And I jumped over and I did my normal flip, and they're like, oh, are you, like trying to wave, and they were confused. Was I okay? And had never seen that. But we have a picture of both of us doing that.
Yeah, my wife was taking pictures basically nonstop. So it was pretty funny. After the race, I was comparing the pictures, and it's interesting to see the two of us, our forms, and how much alike they are at parts, and then occasionally how different they are. But there's a lot of similarities on like efficiency and like where we attacked the A-frame cargo net, right? Like we went to the edge because that's where the rope is tightest, and it was also the shortest path. So you can see us taking the same path on a lot of different things, and then again, like you said, with the 8-foot wall, kind of getting your upper body over and then planting that hand and actually flipping over. So
it's like we're on a team and we have techniques that we share together and train together. It's weird.
Yeah, it is weird. It's like we share them on Tuesdays on Facebook.
Anyways, carrying on. So what else? There was a tire jump thing. So they had like tires stacked together.
Yeah.
And I must say, to like interject too, the volunteers and staff at the race, they were awesome. Every obstacle had attendants, 1 or 2, and they were all cheering and paying attention and directing and calling rules and monitoring for like feet touching the ground and doing them correctly. And I will say that almost every volunteer obstacle I passed, the person spoke English to some extent because they were cheering in English, or I understood what was happening, which again, that's just, to paint a picture for everybody listening, that it definitely, we stood out as a couple of the only Americans that weren't there military-wise. So definitely, I personally don't know any commands in Arabic, and you taught me a couple of the countdown, but that was it. So that was cool that they were cheering and like go over the tire wall, and they're like, jump, like jump high, you can do it. And then we round the corner, and they have this big, just a really nice, it catches your eye structure. It's great for media and banners from sponsors, but you basically run up this really kind of skinny, kind of wobbly ladder, and it's very high in the sky, and then you run across the platform, and then you go back down the ladder, and underneath that is their rope climb. And again, they kind of differentiate their rope climb. It's the skinniest rope climb I've ever done personally in a race. I don't know about you, Evan, but
it's one of the skinniest. It's just like the one at KC Timber Challenge has a very skinny rope too. So
I'd say it's like an inch rope, because normally I think 1.5 inches is standard.
Yeah, I don't know. It was thin.
The rope, the harder it is, so it made it a bit harder. It's pretty tall, so we have some cool pictures of us under that, like the platform doing the rope climb, and then the rig, correct, which was new for what I had an experience in Lebanon. They had a rig set up, and it's like, okay, cool, very deceiving because it's all rings. And again, if you look at the pictures, some of y'all might be like, oh, the rig's just rings, big whoop. Well, there were no defined lanes. So like normally you walk up to a rig and there's 4 lanes, and you can see straight down the lane, and the holds are all in order, and you know what path you're going to go down, and you usually have to stick to one path. Well, not the case here. So they were pretty far apart. I'd say at least 4 feet apart.
Yeah, they were about the width of the CTG one. So like you need to pull back on the last one to get momentum to reach the next one. So So basically like double the length of a normal platinum rig hold, I would say.
And you had to almost swing one-handed to get the full extension. And so Evan and I, pre-race, were looking at it and thinking, okay, we're both going to go at like a Z zigzag through it, because there was no way you could just go straight. And Evan sailed through it. There's an awesome picture of him. It looks great and no problems. First place. Woo! Well, I come to the rig. In typical Brenna fashion, I made it look really hard because I was on the struggle bus. And I went through, I think, like 2 or 3 of the first rings, and then it was like the big turn transition. And I swung, and I just barely missed it on my first try. So then I'm like, I re-gripped both rings, and I used, again, good technique is the back pull with your back arm. You kind of like bend it and pull back to get that swing again. I did that and tried again, and I missed again. And I'm just like dangling, and I'm starting to laugh in my head. I don't want to do burpees. This is at the finish line in front of everyone. Everybody's cheering.
I thought you were done for a second. You had both hands on one ring, and you're basically like hanging still. And then what?
Switched to 2 hands, and I was thinking like, thank you, Yancey Camp, grip obstacles here, because I started to try and like use my hips and swing. Nope, couldn't do it. At that point, I had to like switch directions. I finally got it, but let's just say it. Way more effort and way longer than I should have been on there, and it scared everybody, myself included.
I'll say from an outsider's perspective, you could tell you were an experienced OCR athlete because, when you got stuck, most people who get stuck would just kind of keep on kicking and flailing and not going anywhere, but you actually went backwards. So you reached back to the old ring that you were previously on and used that as, again, to gain momentum to make it across, which you eventually did. So, yeah, The rig was deceivingly hard. I made it across first try, no problem, but I was definitely reaching. Like I didn't feel like, oh, this is right in my comfort zone of like where I can reach. Like I remember being like, all right, I'm going for it, and like really kind of putting my arms out there.
Well, that's what I'd like to see. That everybody pay attention. I mean, I have some contacts with build crews, so I might try to implement that in someone's rig somewhere.
And then after you come off of that, there's essentially it's a pit filled with water and ropes overhead, so you have to essentially low crawl through the water. But the thing was, they've had this at other events, and at other events, I know there's one on my Instagram, I can repost it. Like, I basically kind of turn my head sideways and just kind of slide it under the ropes. They had this thing so high with water, you had to completely submerge essentially. When your heart rate's going near max and you're sticking your head underwater, it's rough. It reminded me of like the cage crawl from Tough Mudder. So it was, I was gasping for air coming out of that.
Well, see, Evan was smart and like went all the way under. I was kind of just paranoid, petrified. I don't know. It was really funky water. And then I messed up anyway. So I was trying to like stick my head sideways and go, and then I wound up swallowing a mouthful of disgusting water. So definitely should have gone underneath, but it was really full. It was funny. Good way to finish it.
And then there was a fire jump, and then you make a sharp U-turn basically, and that's the finish line. So
yeah,
it's kind of
all very spectator friendly right there in that festival area. It was awesome. For those, I mean, we just ran through a really quick course, but definitely check out on the Strength and Speed Facebook page, correct? I believe Evan put together an amazing, which is funny because we went back on course for a second lap and took a bunch of, I was doing live feed and Evan was taking pictures and a ton of little video clips. Got back when we were done, and in no time, I think like hours after the race ended, Evan had put together a really nice recap video, and it pretty much shows from start to finish line. Like we pretty much went through the whole course, and we might have missed a couple of walls, I think.
Yeah, we missed some stuff on the backside, the over-under throughs, and a couple of walls in the back, and a couple like the mounds and kind of pits and stuff like that. But we got most of the interesting obstacles on there, so you can head over and take a look at that. Yeah, and I am pleased. It's not the best quality, but the fact that I can, I did it all on my iPhone and edited on my iPhone, edited the music, and published it online within like a couple hours, I think is a pretty cool thing. So
yeah, and we were fighting the like time zone of being 9 hours ahead. We just wanted to bring you guys coverage, but I mean, there was a few of y'all that were awake at 4 a.m, which was bizarre. So hopefully everybody saw some videos. But Evan, talk about like the festival area real fast, because I feel, it's pretty awesome festival.
Yeah, the festival area was cool. I mean, they laid down essentially, I'm going to use the term like AstroTurf. It was green grass, fake grass basically covering. And they had a bunch of vendors there that were giving away free samples of potato chips and popcorn and stuff like that. What else did they have there? Red Bull was there.
They had had amazing sponsors. So like the sponsors alone, giant Red Bull tent. I think like Quest Nutrition.
Yep.
They had a media company, like event company, that kind of was their co-sponsor. And so I think there were like drones going around. They had a big stage with people. I think in the beginning of the event, they had like a workout warm-up kind of that everybody joined in as a group if you wanted to. And they warmed up a bunch of the racers together. There was like a photo wall that had a 8-foot wall with their big emblem on it that people got to pose and take photos in front of, and like a I survived Hannibal Race pictured backdrop, loud music, and I mean it rained in Kuwait in the desert.
Yeah, it rained like every day we were there, which is I think more times than I've ever seen it rain in Kuwait cumulative. So
Do not pack.
I did not pack my dry robe, which means it has to rain. So
tisk.
Yeah.
It was perfect. I had my dry robe and it was chilly, 60 degrees.
It actually was. Yeah, it was kind of cold with the wind and the rain, and yeah, it was a little chilly. So
getting into that kind of the culture and the dynamic, like talking festival and race and the weather, explain. So like we see, all sorts of clothing and underdressed, overdressed, but I mean, I kind of had the statement to you there when I looked around. First, I stood out because I was in my bright colors. But what about like the finisher shirt? What did you notice? And we kind of said about the finisher shirts there.
Everyone was wearing their finisher shirt at the start line. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. Like I feel like in America that's like a social faux, like a race social faux pas. You're not supposed to wear the finisher shirt until like after the race is over or later in the day. But like everyone was wearing that shirt at the start line. It was like, oh, I guess that's what we're doing here. But
they got it at like a packet pickup, but they were jersey material, and so like everybody looked alike, like jerseys and shirts.
Yeah.
And they all had like, because it was cold. Evan was saying, I mean, it's typically really hot, so everybody was in like long sleeves and gloves and fully dressed, and even Evan was like, I think I'm gonna keep my shirt on because everybody else is dressed here.
Yeah, so I mean, it was like I think it was like 60 degrees, raining with some wind, and I think one of the best lessons for doing the culturally appropriate thing, I feel like you should just pay attention and you look around and see what other people are doing. And when we lined up at the start line or at the beginning of the day, normally I race shirtless, pretty much regardless of the weather, and I looked around and everyone had a shirt on, and I was like, all right, racing in a shirt today. And then on top of that, I have like a Orthodox cross on my back. So, country's primarily Muslim. I felt like that was, I don't think anyone would have had anything negative to say, but I just feel like it was more respectful to keep the shirt on. So I did.
Exactly. And like you said, we were there. I mean, not to say I had a tank top and was ready to race. Like I brought options to, again, pay attention to the culture that I'd never been a part. So I had a tank top. And if I'd worn it, no one would have said anything. Everybody was so hospitable and so amazing and so welcoming. And same with you, if you'd race without your shirt. But we were being like, our hosts brought us there, so we wanted to respect and do what we could to respect the cultures and things. So, I mean, I wore my short sleeve jersey, and there was other instances just, around the hotel with things that we can talk about later, but like the bathing suits and stuff, that it was very welcoming and polite, and no one would have judged us. But we're also able to kind of look around and be like, hey, we don't need to stand out completely. And like,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and later in the day, so the base is the race was near several American military bases that are in Kuwait, and the later waves of the day had a bunch of like U.S. Army and some Navy and Marine stuff like that. Soldiers show up and race, and besides them being white, very blatant Americans, like, a lot of them were shirtless, which I was like, yeah, probably, like, again, like, I would kind of respect the culture a little bit more, but, it's what it is. Again, no one said anything to them, but we were, at the beginning of the day when we were there, when we did our race, it was primarily locals, right? Like, the first wave of the day was Kuwaiti military, and then the next couple waves were essentially the elite waves. But I'm pretty sure everyone got timed all the way up until the last wave. So I think they were still recording all those times and kind of staggering them into the finishing results. But, the race started off, like we were saying, with that uphill climb. And, my plan was to kind of take it easy and not spike my heart rate too high on that climb. So that's what I did, but I ended up kind of leading almost the entire climb. At one point, someone passed me, and then I repassed them before we hit the top. And then once we got to the top, I knew we were going to primarily be on flat. Like Brenna said, there were some hills and stuff like that up there. So you're always kind of descending or ascending or descending slightly. But I knew it was primarily flat. So once I get up to the top of the hill, I just opened it up, right? And I'm running, and I feel like I'm gaining on people. I feel like I'm putting a pretty big gap. I get to one of the tire wall obstacles, and as I'm coming down, the second place guy is right there, and I was like, oh, I better pick it up. So I keep running. Like Brenna said, it's about a 4.4 mile course ish. And at one point, probably about 3 miles in, the course U-turns actually like onto itself, so you can actually like see where you just came from. And now Brenna had been warned that there's a female coming who is the Kuwaiti 10K champion, and she runs a 35-minute 10K, which is fast.
And I'm waiting at the start line. Like, I'm looking. I'm like, all right, I don't see anybody. And then 10 seconds before we take off, they introduce, like, hey, Brenna, this is the 10K champion. And I was like, oh, crap.
Yeah, so we make this U-turn, and I'm in first place. And I look back, and I see second place male, and who's running next to him? But the first place female, right? So, like, I was like, oh, no. I did not fly across the world to get chicked. I was like, this is not going to happen, right? So I start running harder and harder and kind of putting the hammer down. And I ended up coming into the festival area. And I was like, I know if I can get to the festival area first, I can maintain the lead because I'm generally more efficient on obstacles than other people. And I think that's what happened. I ended up beating the second place guy by a minute. He was from UAE because he had or at least he was wearing a Spartan United Arab Emirates shirt on. And that was kind of one other thing that I thought was really cool. I think in Lebanon, I feel like everyone was just kind of wearing whatever, T-shirts or tank tops or whatever. For this one, people had like what kind of jerseys you would see at like OCR World Championships or, like Legend Born or Akuma style jerseys where it had like teams and stuff like that, like, Kuwaiti Spartans and UAE Spartans and stuff like that. Because Spartan's a pretty big company in the Middle East. It's kind of like a franchise. Dubai owns them, so they actually put on the races. So it's not going to be exactly like the Spartan races you'd see in America, but there is a Spartan brand that travels through the Middle East. And then there's Hannibal Race, which spans a couple of countries. So Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, and Kuwait now. And then there's a couple of kind of local brands. Most of them are based out of Dubai, but I think there is one other Kuwaiti brand that I looked at one point, but I don't think they hold races as regularly. But yeah. So anyway, yeah. I thought it was I'm gonna say it. It's the upset of the year because I was certain Brenna was gonna win and I was gonna come in like fifth, and I came in first for the men and Brenna came in second for the women, and we're only 2 months into the year, so I'm going to say this is the upset of the year, and I feel confident that's a true statement. So.
Oh, my gosh. Well, yeah, and so my take on the race was, yeah, the girl shows up at the start line, and there was also another female from Angelique, I believe, from Russia, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
I think Moscow, I think she said.
Yeah, so she looked familiar. I think we talked briefly before the race. She ran some Spartans, so there was some competition around, and we take off. And again, up the hill, I didn't want to die, but I have been running more incline than ever before in my training. Thank you again, Nancy, my coach, love it. And I stuck not like with you, but there's a photo, and I think like fourth. Like I took off and I was right at second, like until the hill, and then we go up the hill, and I maintained like top 5. I think I was fourth up the hill, which was surprising. And then I stayed in the lead for like a brief minute, maybe less than a quarter mile total, and then the girl just like passes me, and I mean she's just booking it immediately, and I was like, okay, well, awesome, we'll see you later. Thinking, okay, hopefully there's an obstacle that stops her up top. But immediately after that, I see her, she's just going for Evan. And I know Evan had a lead at this point, but I kept thinking, I was like, she's after him. And I kind of came to a U-turn spot where I could see that she was with the second place male And it was just in my head, I was thinking, oh my gosh, Evan's going to turn around and see this female there. And I just was laughing. But also knew I did my best. I didn't let up. I tried to catch her. But she, I think, wound up beating me by 4 minutes, I believe, by the finish. But I think she was, fourth overall. I mean, her time held up very nicely for the overall finish. Very fast again. And the fact that it wasn't mandatory obstacles. I would have liked to have seen how the rig would have gone, because I think, correct me, you did say she had to do burpees at the rig, right?
I think so, because she was close to me when we entered the festival area, and then I ended up beating her by several minutes. So I'm pretty sure she at some point had to do burpees, and it was most likely the
again. There's no what if, who knows? But it would have been like just having mandatory obstacles on that rig, because that was the only thing that like would have been my saving grace right there. But it was great competition, so I held second. They had 2 elite waves. So it was kind of one of those like waiting games. We took off for the second lap, and I was just like, oh man, I hope my standings stay. I hope someone in the second wave doesn't just come and smoke my time. But yeah, that was a really nice start to my season, other than the fact that Evan has rubbed it in my face like 5 times, if not more, because the day before the race, everybody's like, oh, hey guys, yeah, y'all are going to win it. And we both said, he needs like 8 hours to start warming up, and that, he'd be like, top 5, top 10, we have a good placement, but Evan kept saying, oh, she's going to win it, and I'll be this, that. So yeah, that was comical. But to rub it in his face, I got all the congratulations with my big fat check walking through the airport. So what?
Yeah, that's true, because you're a female. And you also, the picture you posted has like 300 likes, and mine has like 100. I was like,
my big check picture too is like way more than yours.
I was like, yeah, it's hard, yeah. You're like, hi, I'm a girl, and people
I'll let him have his victories. He can have his victories.
So anyway, I just looked up Angelique Chetonnay, I'm gonna say her name is, and according to her Instagram, she looks French. She's wearing a France shirt. So I thought she said Russia, but she has a bunch of France flags and stuff like that on.
Okay, well maybe it's her fiance that was supposed to be there that's from Russia.
Maybe that's it, and maybe she lives with him now or something. I don't know. Anyway, we're
all speculating, but
yeah. I think it's easy to judge an obstacle course race company when everything goes well, because you're like, all right, that went well, and essentially there's nothing you can do. There's nothing to do because everything went well. I think it's better to look at a company when something does not go perfect. And at Hannibal Race, the third place, the person who was quote unquote the third place female, was actually a guy who had borrowed a female's bib. I don't know if it was intentional or if it was a mix-up or what the deal was, but essentially the third place female was a dude running in a female bib. And at the time of the award ceremony, they didn't know that, or they called the third place female's name. She didn't come up because she wasn't there. And then essentially they went and looked into it afterwards and discovered that it was in fact a male, and that Angelique had come in third. So it was pretty cool to see. We were hanging out with the owner, me, and the following day. It was pretty cool to see him like take that extra effort and kind of run down to make sure the correct people were getting the correct awards. And then I watched him like personally call Angelique and apologize and thank her for coming to the race. And then you saw today they put on their Instagram, congratulating her for third place. So it's cool to see a company like go out of their way to correct something. Whereas I feel like I've been to other races where it's like, oh, we made a mistake, and all right, we're on to the next thing, and they just kind of ignore it. So I really like that.
Tough shit.
Yeah.
Exactly. How you handle a bad situation and turn it into a positive is, way, way higher than just something going smooth and people not seeing that. And I mean, from being on both sides of like a vaccine build and then being the athlete, everything from the athlete perspective, I would say looked pretty flawless. And from athletes and people being around, we never saw like an ambulance or a medic or any issues. And then, actually talking to the staff and the owners, very little, I don't think there were any injuries. There were no obstacle backups, no major crazy issues, which is just always a plus and a positive. That doesn't always happen, but I like to be able to report and say when that does happen. So it was a good experience, race all around. And they did what was different from Lebanon when I went was they had an award ceremony was post-race. They basically, all the waves went off, and I think all the waves finished, majority, And then they did their award ceremony, and there were still a lot of people hanging out and festival having fun. So they, called everybody up and did a good award ceremony and took pictures, and it was awesome, because in Lebanon they did it at a later date because it was televised. So, yeah, that was a cool little change and nice addition.
Yeah, that was really cool. And then, we came off the stage with our oversized checks, and people were like going nuts asking for pictures, and it was like one person after another. But the best picture was one two little kids came up and asked for Brenna's picture, so that was cool to see. But my favorite one was when we were going back to our stuff. There was a older gentleman and a woman in a full hijab, right? So, complete black dress, black gloves on. The only thing you can see are her eyes, and that's it. And she asked for a picture with Brenna, which I thought was really interesting. And I was like, okay, I'll stay out of it because I'm a male. I don't want to, offend her or whatever. And then she asked for a picture with both of us and, the whole family. So that was pretty cool. I wanted a copy of the picture, but I didn't know if that would be offensive. So I was like, all right, I'll just But, yeah, that was pretty interesting to see because it's not something you see every day.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And the two little girls coming up and asking for my picture was, the highlight. I mean, there's so many highlights, but that moment was awesome because I was heartwarming, giggling. I was like, oh, yes, okay, please.
So we're going to run through a couple of – so William Schell, we posted we were going to be doing this episode. So William Schell, one of the strength and speed athletes, asked a bunch of questions. We covered some of them already. We're going to run through his questions real quick and then talk about the Kuwait trip in general. So one of his first question was, how did you deal with the time change? And the short answer is, I didn't. I just basically powered through it. So I personally tried to use REM caps, so Hammer Nutrition's natural sleep aid, to kind of help me fall into line. But other than that, it was just kind of – caffeine when I need to stay awake and kind of dealing with it, with only an 8K race, you can kind of power through it and it's not big of a deal versus when I tried to do Australia and True Grit Enduro, the 24-hour one, that was a lot harder. So,
Brenna, yeah, I would say just in going there, I mean, I guess what I hear typically is going that way, jet lag in the beginning is what's supposed to happen, but for me, it was the excitement of the trip and the excitement of the race is what kept me going. I never was really affected. I slept on the plane. I didn't have any dietary food issues this time, so I snacked and ate every couple hours just so that I was nourished even through my sleeping. And then, I powered through, made it through the race, and then it wasn't until the night after the race or that next morning that everything hit me and I was just really weird and hours were off. And it was kind of I came to do what I did. I raced. Now I'm exhausted and now I'm really thrown off. But we still had fun and things to do. So I was just coffee.
Yeah. He also asked about the desert environment and have that changed any dynamics in our footwear or other gear. I wore Merrell All-Out Crush 2s, same shoes I wore for World's Toughest Mudder. And the sand and the uphill definitely took an extra toll, like Brenna was saying earlier, on her body. And then on top of that, when I'm in first, I kind of, it allows me to release more safety valves and kind of push my body even harder. So it's 4 days post-event, and my legs are still sore. I was running hard. I was running very, very hard to try to, make sure I won once I realized I was in first. And, with the sand and the uphills, I don't know. My legs are sore still, especially a lot of the little stabilizer muscles below my feet. And kind of ankles and shins area. So.
Well, and that's what, like I said, I wore my Innovate Rock Lights. They were awesome. I had a decision, I had mud gear, low ankle socks, and I had tall socks with me. And I just decided with the sand it'd be best to wear the tall ones. I will say I like sand because it's you get dirty and gritty and quote unquote muddy, but then it comes clean way better, I think, than mud. I was pushing it and really was trying my hardest, but I didn't make myself super duper sore like Evan. I don't know what happened for once. This is, again, a weird situation that very weird outcomes. But I will say my training with my coach Nancy and my diet played a lot into how I felt, but my hip flexors are kind of like the sand. And again, we the last bit we were on a tilt. And so everything just felt a little off from that. But no other gear changes really other than that. Go down to the next one. What do you got? What is the general attitude towards Americans there?
Yeah, it's positive. No real issues. I know if you're familiar with history, 1990, 1991, right, Iraq invaded Kuwait, and America, or a coalition led by America, came in, Gulf War, right, and we kicked the Iraqis out. So pretty good memories of that. So they are pretty friendly towards Americans. So not really any issues there. Again, as long as you're respectful of the culture, I don't think there's any real issue. I will say, because I've worked in Kuwait before, they are not fans of Iraqis, right? Like, when Iraq came into Kuwait in 1990, they burned, raped, and pillaged, like, everything. Like, it was bad. The museums, if you go to the museum downtown, like the Kuwaiti National Museum, is just like, there's like nothing in it because the Iraqis came in and essentially ransacked it, right? They have a couple of other like historic sites that are, essentially Kuwaitis that were making it's like the Kuwaiti Alamo, per se. So it's kind of in the southern part of the city where a bunch of Kuwaitis were defending a, building, and there's all like bullet holes and, explosion marks and stuff like that all over the building. So they do not like Iraqis. So, do not bring that up. That's a touchy subject. And as it should be, right? If your neighbor came in and burned part of your house and, killed your dog and, did terrible things to your family, you would not like them either. So I totally get it. But yeah, no.
Kind of leading into the, like you're talking almost the big social differences that we should be aware of. That's what he asked, like do's and don'ts. So that kind of plays into that. I will speak on, like, again, we stayed at a really nice hotel resort, so there's people from everywhere that come there. But going to Kuwait, of course, everybody was questioning, like, Brenna, why would you do that? And, you have to cover yourself up and blah, 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 be prepared. Well, never once, I just want to let everybody know, never once did someone come up to me and tell me or look at me weird because I wasn't covered. Again, I'm American visiting with friends and there with a very awesome host. They weren't gonna be that way. Everybody was hospitable and polite. No one was very judgy. There were a couple, not like staring moments, but a couple times when, like, we're in our race gear, and again, we just stood out, and you could tell that people were kind of looking and seeing, like, what's going on, checking us out, but nothing rude or out of the crazy ordinary. But, like, the pool. So I knew there was a pool, and, like, we were right on the beach, and there'd be a time to go out and swim or get in the water. There's a sign, and everything, I was, again, surprised how much English. Everything was both in, like, Arabic and English. But there's a pool sign that said pool attire, and it had like a bikini with the check and a one piece with the check and like a bathing suit, boys bathing suit with the check mark. So again, you could wear basically whatever was normal to you in your bathing suit. I was just respectful to the culture and knowing, so I came with a one piece just because I wanted to at least do my part in covering up and being modest and respectful. But if I showed up with a bikini, it would have been fine also. So that's just kind of one of those cultural things that everybody was telling me, like, oh, you have to be prepared for this. Well, people, you don't know. You're going based off what you've seen on TV and the news. And I went with an open mind, and I want to go back and will go back and recommend everybody kind of putting it on their list. Again, like Lebanon, it's one of those places that it's awesome to say I've been, and there's history and cultural things to learn and go experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we're going to start transitioning a little more away from the race into the kind of the experience in general. So our hosts were Amin Dib, the owner of Hannibal Race, and then I'm going to pronounce her name wrong. Hiba? I keep wanting to say Hiba, but that's not right. I think it's Hiba. So I can't pronounce her last name.
It's like Qatar, but it's Qatar.
It's like a GH sound. But yeah, Hiba, the two of them were awesome, right? Like, I'm going to try to describe how hospitable they were, but like, it's not going to do it justice because, the hotel was amazing. And then every time we did something, it was like, oh, that was so good. You can't top that. And then they would top it at the next thing, right? Like the breakfast and lunch buffet at the hotel was just phenomenal, right? Literally had like a little bit of everything, local food or, snacks and all sorts of good stuff in there. And then after the race, they're like, the Saturday night we're doing a post-race party. It's a barbecue at the hotel. And we're like, oh, cool, barbecue. Got it. So I guess barbecue means a different thing in Kuwait because we show up and it's like a wedding reception. I was like, what is going on? There's five 5 tables worth of desserts, right? Just desserts. That's 5 tables. They had 3 tables worth of like salad and fruits and hummus and baba ganoush and, different dips and stuff like that. And then they had like 7 or 8 stations that you would see at a wedding, right? So there was like a gyro station. There was a full lamb, right, with like feet and head still on, skewered, right? There was a stir fry station. There was a seafood station. There was pasta station. There was like a mixed grill station, yeah, with the kebabs. And there's like 1 or 2 other ones. It was just so ridiculous, like I was like laughing because it was so over the top. And it's like I think in America we've been doing post race parties wrong. Like that's all I kept thinking, There was no alcohol though, because obviously alcohol is illegal. So a lot of times they serve fresh juice. That's like their thing instead. So they had like fresh watermelon juice, and that was really good. Yeah. So.
And then the tables, it was like full linen table service and like linen chairs, and it was just a poolside with lights and a DJ, and it was done up quite nice. Let's just say post race was nothing short of. Again, I was like, yeah, there's no way that the race day could be better, and then boom, it was better.
And speaking of poolside, so the race ends, we go back to the hotel, and Brenna's like, oh, let's go for a dip in the hot tub. And I'm like, yeah, like that's what we did in Lebanon. It was super relaxing, after a nice race, kind of loosen up the muscles. So, we go over, we change into our bathing suits. My wife and daughter stay in the hotel room because they're sleepy. And we go down to what we think is the hot tub, and it's bubbling, right? And I'm like, oh, yeah.
So, and it's the size of a hot tub.
The size of a hot tub, right? So we get next to it, and I'm glad I didn't just step in, because I put 1 foot in, and I was like, ah! I was like, it's freezing. It wasn't like room temperature water. It was cold. It was like a hot tub sized pool of ice cold water, and like bubbling. And so like I'm screaming, Brennan's laughing, and the guy, one of the workers, is like, the hot tub's over there, and we're like, oh. Clearly, yeah, we made a mistake, clearly. So we grab our stuff, and we're like, oh, thank you. This is going to be much better. And we walk over, and, you can call it a hot tub, but a better description would be a warm pool. Because
we were still confused, because you could tell we walked up to it, and we're like, I don't see a hot tub. Again, I'm thinking American hot tub. And we see, like, another what would be like the size of like a kiddie pool separate, just like a secondary smaller pool with a rock waterfall. And we're kind of looking around. The guy comes up behind us. He's like pointing like, yeah, that's what you want. And then I look at each other like, okay, wow, a whole pool at the hot tub? Awesome.
Anyway, we got in, and like basically I had to huddle around the jet to stay even remotely warm. Probably stayed in for about 30 minutes, and I was shaking most of the time. But I was in the middle of editing that video I put up, so we basically stayed in there and dealt with it.
Yeah, so cultural difference. They don't, I guess, normally it's hot there.
Right, yeah, if it's 110 degrees, I bet you that ice tub or whatever it's called, right, feels awesome. We also did the typical Middle Eastern thing and went to the mall on Sunday. So their malls are like over the top big. So we're talking like Mall of America and bigger type stuff. So the one we went to is called the Avenues, and it is it's just enormous. Brenna, how would you describe the Avenues?
Yeah, so imagine like if you've ever been to Atlanta, Phipps Plaza, fanciest mall you've ever seen, or like an indoor Rodeo Drive times 10 in size, or yeah. Phipps Plaza from Atlanta times 20 in size.
Or like some of the shopping in Las Vegas, but I know some of the shopping in Las Vegas, but imagine like doubling the distance between everything. So there's just like a lot of open space in there. Like you could drive like several cars down the middle. Yeah. Yeah, and it was just, there was like giant palm trees in the center. And then here, again, people, this is what's hilarious. And it was not just in the mall, but right next to our hotel was the first shocker. I saw Starbucks and McDonald's. I'm like, yeah, go figure, because that's everywhere. But right next to our hotel was a Five Guys Burgers, which was like jaw-dropping, shocked. But in this mall, and even closer, there was Cheesecake Factory, Texas Roadhouse, which of course I had to take a picture in front of. I don't know. There were like 3 other things. Cane's Chicken.
and like a bunch of other things that were American. And then the stores, other than like designers that we recognize that aren't necessarily American, but they're designers we know, there's like the Body Shop and Victoria's Secret, and then of course Louis Vuitton, and then 10 times fancier than that. And I think 2 different movie theaters, and they were called like phases. Like we were only in phase 4, and there was, you know, like however many more that we didn't see, and restaurants and everything. It was ridiculous, and I love shopping, but it was one of those like, I am not buying anything. This was a look only.
Yeah, the prices are going to be a lot cheaper in the U.S. if you compare the prices,
But it was just jaw dropping, cool to see. Lots of pictures on social media if you want to see. It's kind of, again, we went on, so Sunday there is a work day, not to us, you know, that's a Christian holiday, so it was different going in, and we got to see rush hour traffic finally. Like I did see some crazy traffic. Lanes don't mean anything, no signals are used. You go whatever speed limit until the locals know where the speed cameras are.
yeah.
It was interesting.
Yeah, just like in America, I think the most dangerous part is driving to and from the race. You know, people drive pretty fast there, so.
But I mean, we were taken care of, so.
Yeah.
That food,
So, yeah.
we had Lebanese food there because that's like, okay, Amin, the owner, and our hosts are from Lebanon, and so we got to have a very delicious Lebanese lunch when we were in the mall with them shopping and browsing, and it was amazing. The food there, like Evan has said before, he loves eating it all day long, but even for me now, I just didn't have any fried greasy stuff for 4 days or whatever, and could stuff my face and not feel guilty or sick afterwards, and it was just deliciousness.
I feel like I ate so much. I was sad to leave, and I was also like, oh, I don't think I can stay in this level of eating for another couple days. You know, it's just it was so good.
Well, I was gonna say that like people that don't know and they're planning like racecations and they're going to Europe and everything, like, yeah, it's a cool race, okay, but you can see a whole different culture. And I'm sorry, but when I went to London and Europe, food there is not exciting. And I've been told on multiple occasions when you go, you should eat Indian food. And to me, I'm going to Europe and London, eating Indian food, it just kind of sounds funny. But like in Lebanon and in Kuwait, the Mediterranean cuisine, oh, so delicious. And they have every other type of cuisine too. But that alone is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we won from the race was they gave us, our checks were oversized, right? So they're like the typical race, the size of the check you'd see at like Conquer the Gauntlet or Savage, but we got to take them home, and you know, we're essentially traveling.
Treat. They kind of like, they did that out of like a extra bonus for us. So that was a thank you for that.
Oh, and then they gave us like an envelope, which we assumed was a check when we left. And Brenna, like, we're in the van with, like, you know, 15 other people heading back to the hotel, and Brenna's, like opening her envelope, and she's like, and I was like, what? And she's like, it's not a check. So it was like hundreds. It was $100 bills. So.
Well, I just wanted to verify and, like, see if that my name was spelled right or something, because, again, we were leaving a country with a check, and I wasn't paying attention, but I was trying to be discreet, and I opened it. I was just like, oh, my goodness gracious. Wasn't expecting that, because, again, the checks that I have won sometimes or podium prizes in the U.S. are like a piece of paper, so it was kind of comical. But the big check, yeah, William had a question of like, how do you travel home with a giant check?
So I mean, it's pretty simple. Well, my big concern was getting through customs initially at Kuwait, right? Because I've traveled through Jordan before, and they tried to confiscate my fat grips. They gave those back, and they ended up confiscating one of my atomic climbing holds because it. You know, it's like looks like a pool ball. Yeah, it looks like a weapon, right? So they took that. So I feel like anytime they see something that they're not familiar with or it's out of the ordinary, they don't like it. So they'll just take it just to be safe. So I was worried they weren't going to let us through with these giant checks. But they did. Brenna kept getting Yeah.
Well, we had a game plan. We were like, I'm going to go first. We're going to play that little like redhead American cute girl card of like, all right, you go first, and we'll see if yours goes through, because then the other one should go through. And then we were also kind of giggling like through security, like, should we split lanes and you try that way and I try this way? Again, it was nothing serious, but like we got through one checkpoint and we look at each other, we're like, all right, it's one down, and we get through another one and they like scan it, we're like, okay, that's the next step. But everybody, I mean, for me, it was funny because again, yeah, Evan, you beat me, woohoo! But I got congratulations from like every security person. They're like, "Oh, awesome, congratulations!" And then Evan would be right behind me and just like walk
You
by
didn't
and
say
then
anything to me. Like, oh, you're a dude? Not interested. Okay.
yeah.
Good.
And then so past security, I will say the airlines, you have to be, polite and nice. So I just would ask the stewardess, flight attendant, do you mind, can you put this in your closet, the captain's closet, the coat closet, first class closet? And they did the whole way for me. I know our teammate Ashley has traveled with her like Savage Axe before, I believe she had to fly with. And she's had to fly with some interesting things, the gauntlet gloves and a couple different things. So it's just most of it goes as long as it's not going to like, you have to be careful. I think Mud Ninja or whichever one I believe has like swords and ninja stars that don't really make it through the airport, but I mean, it's obvious.
You have to check that. So
I will say, well, you got I'd say my biggest scare was like I made it through all of Kuwait and Qatar, and then it was when I was in Chicago that the people were kind of like, well, are you going to check that? And I said, no, I made it from Kuwait this far. And then it was when I got on my plane, they're like, I don't know if there's going to be room for that. And I said, well, I think I can go in the coat closet. Well, I don't know about that. And I was like my last flight out of 4, but it made it. So no big deal.
So not much different than mine. Mine made it from Kuwait through Turkey to Toronto into Canada. And then I get on my plane to go from Canada back to North Carolina, which is where I'm working this week. And I'm like, can you put this in the coat closet? And they're like, we don't have a coat closet. And I was like, okay. She's like, you can put it in the overhead. So I was like, I don't think this is going to fucking fit, because it's a smaller plane. So I go to put it in the overhead. It doesn't fit. And I was like, all right. Yeah, there's empty seats on the plane. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to put it in this empty seat here. It's not going to be a problem. And of course, the stewardess is like, you can't leave the check there. And it's like, there's literally no one sitting there, and it's a piece of cardboard. Like, just leave it alone. She's like, no, we're gonna have to check this. And I was like, please, it is not gonna survive if you check it. Like, it will shatter. It will be broken. And she's like, all right, we'll try something else. So she somehow shimmies it under the seat up near the front. And then when I got off the plane, I'm like, how did you get this in here? And she's like, I'll get it out for you. So she reaches under and like starts pulling it and like bends it, and I'm like, and I was like, oh no, it's gonna break. And then she made it, she just bent it a little bit, and it basically went back to its normal shape. But I was like, I freaking carried this thing for like literally 30 hours, and I was like, this woman's about to throw it under the plane and have it get crushed by other luggage. So.
That's awesome.
And I still got to fly. So I'm in North Carolina right now. I still got to fly it back to Kansas City in 2 days. So
see, I'm gonna laugh. The States are gonna be your biggest problem.
I'm gonna but see, I'll make a scene there. I won't make a scene in Kuwait or Turkey because I don't want to get arrested. But I'll make a scene in the United States. So.
Oh man. I will say. So I think we kind of like answered all those questions, I believe. But I was gonna say, just coming back. Like from travels to the time change question, I mean, yesterday was I have no idea how long we were up by the time, because we got like picked up from the hotel at 1 a.m. because our flight was so early. And then that's 1 a.m. Kuwait time. And then I think our like air travel time for your wife and I was like 18 hours total air time with like, and then add in layers. And so 24, 30 hours of traveling, and you had more. So today, being back in the States and being home, I did come home last night to Tulsa, and Tracy picked me up at the airport, and I had to go straight to, I didn't have to, but staff, Dilly Diner staff party. I got dressed up in formal attire, formal dress with a suit with Tracy, and went to a party last night for like an hour before I crashed. And today has been one of those, like, I'm foggy. I feel really weird, just like weak and out of it and disoriented. I've been kind of trying to like force myself to eat just to make sure I'm eating, because I just feel really off and weird. But back to work tomorrow. But you've been straight working and probably need to end this so you can go to bed.
I got back to my hotel at 3 and went into work at 7. So, but I slept a little bit on the plane on both plane rides home. Again, those REM caps from Hammer Nutrition came in handy.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even tell you real fast, everybody. I was so lucky. I have to have window seats on my flights, and I requested all the way. Like once I got to the other countries and dealt with Qatar, I can't pronounce it, Airlines. I got window seats, and then my Chicago to Tulsa flight, I was supposed to have a window seat. Ugh, got all messed up. Some lady wanted to sit with her husband, and the flight attendant yelled at me and made me move. And oh man, I threw a hissy fit because it was the last leg of my travels, and I was just over it. And I looked at the lady. I had to sit in the aisle. And some of y'all might be like, boo-hoo, but I can't sleep or function on the aisle seat. And after racing and traveling, I was like a jittery mess. I looked at the couple and I as politely as possible, I said, ma'am, next time you might just want to wait and ask before you take someone's seat, because I specifically requested and picked that window. And she looked at me, she's like, I was so over it. They offered me an Oreo. They're like, you want an Oreo? Oh, the end of my trip.
Anyway, again, for those who are like concerned about safety, my wife flew over, who is 5 months pregnant. Obviously, no issues, and we brought our 4-year-old daughter. So again, no issues. They both
was popular. They loved her.
Yeah, I mean, little blonde girl and blue eyes. So they were. I mean, that's like an anomaly there. So everyone loved her, right? Like everyone wanted to take pictures with her and pinch her cheeks and hold her hand, and it was like, she doesn't understand why she's tired from the time zone change. So she was a little bit grumpy at times, but at night
even like the restaurant workers were so nice, and I mean everywhere, yeah. But safety wise, I mean the fact that like you felt comfortable with your wife and daughter traveling without you over there, and then I mean she hung out at the race by herself without you while you were racing. Again, yeah. It was no fears other than, and we've said it before, I think when we went to Lebanon, that there's places in America that you like just don't go because they're bad areas, bad neighborhoods. Like certain places in Atlanta, DC, everywhere has a bad neighborhood. So it was kind of the same thing. We weren't like stuck in any bad situation or bad neighborhood, but they are there, obviously.
Let's see what else.
I think that's it.
That covers the whole trip.
More pictures to come.
Yeah, I mean,
the photographer.
Yeah, we produced a ton of content. If you go back to Conquer the Gauntlet Pro Team and Strength and Speed, and then Brenna's pages, we're dropping videos pretty much all weekend and pictures all weekend. So.
And they've got professional photos coming because there was like several photographers on course. They even had like a professional Red Bull photographer was there. So, I mean, that's exciting to see from a race series. Some of our race series don't even have as awesome photos as theirs.
And one of my favorite, to show you like the complete OCR nerd I am, one of my favorite things was they gave us like a custom race jersey, right, with our names in the back. And that was like one of my favorite parts of the trip. I was like, ooh, custom race jersey, like.
Yeah, it was like a surprise to us. They, put his last name and Red Beast on it. And we didn't even mention the swag. Like, I think we both took pictures, but they did like a race packet pickup the day before with a custom drawstring bag that was logoed with the race logo and everything. You got a wristband that was reversible, double-sided wristband, a buff, and then every wave had specific colored tied to their wave to like designate what wave, headband, logoed headband. And then they like your race jersey, finisher shirt, and
then the finisher's medal. So the finisher's medal is like, it's heavy duty. It reminds me of like a smaller version of the NORAM medals where it's like super heavy and super thick. So that's really cool. And then they have like one side's like all silver and the other side is colorized, so red and silver. So and then these cut like the ribbon is nice too, right? It's got the logo and stuff. So they really did a nice job. And I think what was for the coolest parts for me, this is my 4th Hannibal race technically, right? I did 2 the first time I was in Lebanon, so end of 15, early 16. And then me and Brenna went back in 2017, and then this is my first one in Kuwait in 2019. So it's been cool to kind of see the company progress over the last couple of years, and they just keep making it better and better and keep adding more things. So it kind of brings a lot of the things we really enjoy about OCR here in America overseas.
I feel like we did a good job of covering everything. We talked a long time. You'll probably fall asleep, but I don't know. I think that was, again, there aren't enough words to explain how gracious everybody was. And I do recommend, I'm like, some of y'all might wonder that we just had an awesome experience and something like blessed to have, but check it out. I mean, I'm going back, you're going back. If anybody wants to come and join, now you know other people like will be there, so you won't be the only Americans. You won't feel weird or nervous. And again, there's history, there's historical things you can do and see, make a family vacation out of it. So and again, I can't say enough thanks to Amin and Hippa and Kareen, who we didn't get to see, and Sam and the whole Hannibal crew family, Lebanon, Kuwait. Amazing. Like, much love, thanks, world life experiences. And I'm blessed and thankful. And to you, Evan, because I wouldn't have experienced this without you. So,
yeah.
But yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, they were just like, I'm so like, I know it's hard to convey how great they were to us. It was just such a wonderful experience, and definitely truly feel blessed that.
And y'all would. It's not just that it was you and me. If anybody else came, like, and showed that they wanted to check out a race series from another side of the world, their hospital, like, Amin would be so gracious if any American showed up and showed interest in his race series, because he is that passionate about the sport. So he would be so happy to see others come over. So I recommend it.
Absolutely. All right, I think that wraps it up. We've been talking for a while. I'm going to go to sleep.
Sounds good.
So good. Go look at pictures online. Yeah, a shout out to my wife, because she's a trooper, and with my daughter being real fussy, she handled it real well. And yeah, can't say enough good things. I know some people, like I keep a lot of my private life private and don't post that to social media. Like, my social media is pretty much obstacle course racing only, so you don't get to see a lot of those pictures. But yeah, big shout out to her. She did such a phenomenal job, and yeah.
And I'm glad. Thank you, Amy, for coming, because if you didn't go, I probably would have been doing a lot of traveling by myself, and it was a lot of traveling to do by myself. So I'm glad you were there with me.
Awesome. All right, Brenna, we'll catch up with you later.
Yes. Nighty night, sir.
Night night.